like to introduce you to Shelly Lazarus. Shelly is Chair Emerita of Ogilvy & Mather, the storied marketing, PR, and advertising firm that was the inspiration for the hit television series Mad Men. Shelly was a leader in innovation in the process of brand building and clients, and led the organization for more than 40 years. She currently serves on the boards of General Electric, Merck, and the World Wildlife Fund, among others, and this week joined the board of the Blackstone Group. So let's give a hand for that. Shelly is the only woman on the board, and the first woman on the board. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. And so we are all very glad that you are there, and it's a notable occasion. And you're going to hear the rest of her story from her own perspective. So without further ado, let's get started.
Great.
So Shelly, you were born in Brooklyn, and your father was an accountant, your mother was a housewife, and you've described your childhood as very normal. Can you talk about how your parents were influential on your life? By the way, we're going to be passing the microphone, so...
Well, it was, you know, sort of, I had a very typical suburban upbringing, but there was never anything that I talked about doing that my parents said, oh, a girl can't do that. And as a matter of fact, in one of my father would come home and talk about everything he was doing in business, and I was always fascinated by it. And at some point when I was about 11, he bought me my first shares of stock, which was, you know, a whole fascinating thing to me. So from the age of about 11 till now, except they don't have stock market tables anymore, I mean, every morning I would go and check the listings of the New York Stock Exchange to see how I was doing. And so I think it was just sort of a natural introduction to the whole world of business and how interesting it was, and then with no holds barred, you know, it never occurred to me that a girl couldn't do something. So here we are.
And what about school? Were you a learner? Did you like school? Were you good at school?
I love school. I did. I just learning to. I can remember sitting here right now. What it was like to learn to read, and it was thrilling. And so I loved school. I was good at it. It came easy, so I could also have fun at school because I didn't have to work so hard. I was a strange thing happened to me in school. I was really smart in 4th grade, and they were starting to pay attention and thought maybe I was getting bored. And somehow in the middle of 5th grade, they just moved me into the middle of 6th grade, which is a terrible thing to do to somebody. I mean, because you don't know any of the kids, and then we were going to junior high 3 months later. But when I think back on it, it was kind of, you know, it was being thrown into the pool. You were just thrown in. No one sat you down and said, okay, here are the things we learned for the last 6 months in 6th grade. You just sort of had to catch up. And so it was the first, you know, because it was really easy for me up to that point. And then all of a sudden I had to catch up. And I think sometimes when I'm sitting in client meetings, you know, I go to a new client and they all start talking in acronyms, and everyone just assumes that everyone around the table knows exactly what's going on and all that. And it's kind of like being thrown into 6th grade. You just kind of, you pick it up, you learn it, you become a good listener. You know, and you get a little rhythm after a while, and so I think it was a formative experience.
And what was your first job? Did you work before you went to college?
No, I never. I mean, I was a counselor. But that was work, but it wasn't like really work. I mean, the thing that was that people can't imagine today, I can hardly imagine, is that I went to Smith. I went to an all-girls college, and because I wanted to get a job, I needed to earn money. And if you wanted to enter the commercial world, I graduated in 1968. If you wanted to enter the commercial world in those days, you had to type. You could decide where you typed, but you type in a law firm, you type in an advertising agency, but you were typing. And so that really wasn't so appealing to me. And when I must have looked distraught at some moment when I was talking to some HR person who was a woman, she said, I bet if you had an MBA, they couldn't make you type. Which, by the way, was a she said it hypothetically, not like for sure you couldn't have to type. And of course, I didn't know what an MBA was, so that was the first thing. But I'm quick. I went and I found out what an MBA was. And so after 4 years at an all-girls college, 4 days after graduation, I started at Columbia Business School, where I was one of 4 women in a class of 300. And so yes, well, it was quite an experience, and you know, so it was just again sort of being thrown in, and I had no idea. I mean, I didn't know about business school. I didn't know what an MBA was. I fell into marketing because I took the only class I liked was I took a marketing class, and I really liked it. So the whole thing was kind of a bit of an accident.
And one part of the accident, though, was that you needed to make money, right?
Yes, oh, for sure.
And that was because?
Well, because I was my now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, was at Columbia Medical School, and so he wasn't making any money, and that was a long haul. So somebody was going to have to make money if we were going to get married. So I am the only woman, I believe, who ever went to Columbia Business School to make money to get married. And I say that proudly whenever I go back and speak at Columbia Business School. You know, they think I'm kidding, but it was true. It was true. Because actually what they think is that I went to Columbia Business School to find a husband. That's how it usually comes across. But I already had the guy, I just needed the money.
Okay, so while you were at Columbia, you did an internship at General Foods. And there was a woman there you told me about named Sandra Meyer, who was a pioneer in marketing and who became the first woman product group manager at General Foods. She made an impression on you, especially when she got pregnant, and I want you to tell that story.
Well, so when I arrived, I was the first professional woman to ever work in the Maxwell House division of General Foods. I was just an intern, and it was like people were hysterical. I mean, there was a guy who went to the head of the division and said, "You can't have a woman working here." You know, it was just like this. It was only for 3 months. Come on, you can handle it. And but anyway, so as soon as I arrived, everyone said, "Oh, you got to meet Sandra Meyer," because she was the. There was one other woman, but Sandra was the senior one. But then they said, but there's a problem. You know, there's a problem. And the problem was that there was a rule at General Foods that as soon as you started to show, and when you were pregnant and you started to show, you were not allowed to come to the office anymore. So Sandra, being the indomitable person that she was, she took a hotel room at the White Plains Hotel. So you had to leave the building, and you had to go into White Plains to go to the hotel. And Sandra would conduct all her meetings in her hotel room, in this hotel room that she had rented. And so she just had, and here was the thing, no one thought it was odd. It was just like, yeah, she's pregnant, so she's in the hotel. So anyway, that's when I first met Sandra, actually, and it's just that's the way it was.
And somehow your next job, when you graduated, was not at General Foods.
No.
It was at Clara. And so tell us about Clara, why you went there, and what you did there as a product manager. What does a product manager do?
Okay. So General Foods did want me back. It's just, but you know, but sort of being young and cavalier, and you know, I didn't like that whole reverse commuting thing. It wasn't like if they were in Manhattan, I would have said yes in a minute, but they weren't. So I didn't want to go to White Plains every day. So I interviewed in lots of places, and the one thing about Clara was that there was another woman there, which was really amazing, because there weren't any women anywhere, even though all the products that were being sold were to women. And so her name was Sydney, actually. I kept thinking, I wonder if she got in because they didn't realize that she was a girl. Sydney Ward, just, and she was great. And also she kept saying to me, oh, please come, because it would be so great if you were here. And I just liked the people there, and it was a very creative place, and it wasn't sort of as disciplined as a place like General Foods or Procter & Gamble, or it was a little freer. I thought this would be fun. I went to hair coloring school. Everyone at Clara had to go to hair coloring school. The deal was that women could come in and get their hair colored for free, but if they were paying attention, there were no mirrors in this whole salon because they were doing half head tests. They were. But there was a genius woman who could fix anything, so that if one side turned blue and the other was blue, she'd come in and she would just fix it before you even saw it, and that's why there were no mirrors. So anyway, I went to hair coloring school. I really liked it. You had to actually color people's hair and wash their hair and the whole deal. But then you were assigned a product, and you did everything for it. That was what was so interesting, is, from the manufacturing to the pricing to promotion, packaging. I learned everything about the marketing mix, basically. This was 1970. Wow. And here was the other thing, is, because it was a hair coloring company, there were like 8 people who were on Miss Clairol or Beautiful Blonde, or I can't remember all the names anymore. Right, Loving Care. So each one of these hair coloring products had this big product group. But because shampoos and conditioners weren't that important to Clairol, they took all of them and put them together, and there was just like 3 people working on it, me and 2 guys, and that was cool. That was great. So we had this portfolio of shampoos and conditioners. I am the person who introduced herbal essence to the world, which was great. And it was a wonderful experience because it was one of those moments. It was sort of like, to me, the most creative thing you can do is market a fragrance, because you have to create a whole narrative. There's nothing, it's just a smell. You have to make up everything else. You have to get the name, the bottle. So the senior vice president of marketing walked into my boss's office one day and put on his desk this bottle of green stuff. And he said, I found this shampoo, I was just in London, I found this shampoo in some herbal store, and it's got the most amazing smell. We ought to market it as a shampoo. And so that's all we had. We had green, nicely scented shampoo. And everything else we made up. The name, the imagery, the bottle, that sort of old-fashioned, at the start, it was that sort of old-fashioned bottle, right? The woman with the hair and all the flowers in her hair. It was really, if you like to use your creativity, and you just sort of, and you harness the imagination of all the people who were working in the different functions, because there was nothing there. And so you brought the packaging guy in and said, okay, here, smell it, here's what we're thinking about, now here's a positioning, and what do you think we should do for a package? And it was actually his coming back with these different packaging ideas and labeling ideas that sort of unleashed the creative spirit of everybody else, because you started to feel a sensibility. And that's about as much fun as you can have in marketing.
How did they do, so it's 99.1% men that work there, how did they do market research, and how did they...
Oh, they talked to women.
Oh, they did.
Actually, there was a woman who ran market research. That was one of the ghettos for women. But women were allowed to do market research. That was allowed. But it's a great question. This is why, I've told the story before. This is why I was always so powerful, because there were no other women in the room. And so, you know, there would always come this moment where a group of men, after they had opined for 25 minutes on how women feel about their hair, or whatever it was, they would turn to me and, you know, sort of in this very sort of official way, go, "Well, Shelley, what do women think?" And so for years, I was talking on behalf of all women in the world. In conference rooms, in American companies, everywhere, you know, because, and then I'd feel bad because I think, you know, that's just what I think. But then I thought, well, actually, I probably have a better understanding than any of them. So, hey, go for it, you know.
And so it was not that long before something actually did tear you away from Clara, and that was Ogilvy. So tell us how that happened.
Yes. Well, so when I was at General Foods, Ogilvy was the agency, actually. So I knew them. And I was so happy at Clara. I just loved it. But I got a call from a headhunter, and she said, Ogilvy is looking for someone who knows something about hair for the Unilever account. And, you know, would you go talk to them? And I said, well, I'm not going to go because I'm so happy here. But I hadn't seen all those guys who I had met 3 summers before. And I thought, I'm going to go over there and just say hi to them again because they had been great. I had a, you know, wonderful experience with the Ogilvy people when I was at General Foods. And I went over there and I just got seduced, you know, and it just sounded cool and they were great and they're funny and witty and I thought, well, you know, here I'll go to the agency side. I'll do 2 or 3 years there, and then I'll figure it out, and I'll become a general manager or something somewhere. And so I went, and I just never left. You know, that's the story. Is I was always happy. You know, I was always challenged. Whenever I was getting a little bit bored, I was pretty good about raising my hand and saying, you know, I can take something else on. And so I never had time to get bored. And, you know, it was just an environment, a set of values, a group of people that I just got on with. And so, intending to stay no more than 2 or 3 years, I'm still there.
Now, within those first 2 or 3 years, something else did happen to you, which is that you got pregnant.
Yes.
Tell us what that experience was like at Ogilvy.
Well, I didn't have to go to a hotel, so that was good. And but everyone was very solicitous, and you know, this is sort of evidence, I think, of the ethic of Ogilvy and the commitment to people, which I came to know when I was pregnant, because I had trouble with my pregnancy, and I had to stay in bed for a few weeks, and then I couldn't stand staying in bed anymore, so I got up and I went back to the office. And I hadn't been there for more than 2 or 3 hours when the president of Ogilvy called me in my office, which was a little surprising. I mean, I knew him, and he thought it was cool that there was a woman working, you know, in account management. And Andrew called me and said, I don't approve of what you're doing. I know what's going on. I don't approve of what you're doing, but the least that you could do is I'm going to send my car for you every day to pick you up and take you back to work. I'd take you back home, which was, you know, amazing. I mean, just the very fact that he knew what was happening. I mean, I was an account executive. I was a child. That he called, that he offered his car. So it was that kind of place. But the other really remarkable thing that happened over the course of the pregnancy was David Ogilvy was kind of retired by this point. I hadn't really met him. I had been lectured by him in a group once. But he used to come back to New York. He had bought his chateau in France, but he used to come back to New York maybe 3 months a year or something like that. And so I'm 9 months pregnant. I'm quite pregnant. I'm sitting in my office. I'm, you know, out to there at 6 o'clock at night, and I look up one evening, and there is David Ogilvy standing in my doorway, just staring at me, which he does. He he does that. He did that. So he's staring at me, and when I looked up, he said to me, "Are you all right?" And I said, "I'm fine." And he said, "Mind if I come in?" You know, and so he came and we chatted for about 45 minutes. And then for my whole 9th month of pregnancy, every night at 6 o'clock, David Ogilvy would show up in my office to see how I was. And so we became fast friends. I mean, how could you not after all that? The other interesting thing was my direct boss. He at one point decided that he needed to make a trial run with me to the hospital, just in case anything happened, because he didn't feel responsible if he didn't do it. And it was Columbia Presbyterian, so it was up at 168th Street. And I said, "Dave, we're going to be fine. I know how to go." I said, you know, and this is like a first pregnancy. It takes a long time. It's not like the movies, you know, where you go racing. You got to get there. So it was very unnatural, the whole thing. It was very obvious. It was a big event at the agency, but in a way, it became the means by which all these people demonstrated how much they really cared. So it was good.
That's a wonderful story, and it's an interesting lead-in to what happened to you, which is that very soon after, you left Ogilvy and moved to Dayton, and I'd love for you to tell us why and how you succeeded at being a housewife.
God, it was so bad. Really, it was the best thing that ever. I told Alice this was the best thing that had ever happened to me. So most of you will not remember that there was a doctor's draft at the time of the Vietnam War. So if you had a medical degree, you had to go and serve. But there was an out that if you signed an agreement, you could finish your residency and then go to Vietnam. But since my husband was a pediatrician, we figured the odds were that he wasn't going to Vietnam, you know, because they were not taking care of a lot of babies there. So anyway, George had this commitment to go into the armed forces. By the time he actually finished his residency, the Vietnam War was over, but he still had this obligation to go in. So they sent us to Dayton, Ohio, and I thought, well, this will be perfect because I had just given birth 3 months before. It's a natural break. I was on military leave from Ogilvy, which is a whole other thing. They did offer to fly me back and forth, which, you know, if it were now, you'd consider it. Actually, what we would have done is my husband would have flown back and forth every weekend from Dayton. But women didn't do that in those days. And so I thought, well, great, I'll stay home with our baby for 2 years when we're in Dayton, and then, you know, I'll come back. And so we went off to Ohio. We lived right off a military base. Women's liberation had not actually come to Ohio yet. And as a friend of mine said, who grew up there and came to visit me at one point, she said, the problem with the women here is that they don't generalize. Everything is so concrete, they can only talk about what actually happened to them, you know, today in the morning. And anyway, I was okay till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And at that point, I was just like, I couldn't do it anymore. I mean, it became obvious to me. I mean, I was crazy about my baby, but I couldn't do that sitting on the floor playing blocks. So there was just no way. So and it wasn't good for him. It wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for anybody. But when I think back on it, when I look back on it, it was so important that that happened to me because I was never guilty afterwards because I couldn't do it. And so, you know, women who agonize of shouldn't I be at home with the baby and all that? Not me, because I would have been, you know, I would have been a mad woman, not in the television sense, but if I had to stay home all day and just sit on the floor and do that stuff, so it all worked brilliantly. Because you know, I actually got a job in Ohio. I worked in retail. I ran a department. I loved it, actually. And I just got into a rhythm of having a nanny, you know, leaving the baby at home. It became, you know, I used to get home at 5. He was fine. That's at the point where I started to keep my kids up really late so I would have time with them. You know, and he was fine. I was fine. Everybody was fine. So I never felt guilt after that, and that was really, really important.
So obviously Ogilvy wanted you back, having offered to fly you back and forth, which I would just say that Shelley is a very modest person, because she had only been with Ogilvy for 3 years at the point that this happened, when they offered to commute, and this was in the 1970s, which was a point at which companies did not routinely fly employees back and forth across the country for their jobs. So I think it's a huge tribute to you. But you did go back to Ogilvy, and you had a meteoric career from that point forward. They put you on Avon, Ralston Purina, Campbell Soup. American Express was the account that had the biggest impact on your career. So if you could talk a little about that, and perhaps IBM, that would be terrific.
So there, in the old days, in advertising and in marketing in general, packaged goods was the place where the smartest, most capable people were put. And you know, you worked on Procter & Gamble or General Foods or Colgate or, you know, one of those packaged goods companies. And a funny thing was happening at Ogilvy, though, because the fastest growing account they had was American Express, and actually it was their biggest account. Ogilvy sort of figured out the whole American Express card thing, and American Express relied on Ogilvy enormously to do the marketing and the advertising. And at some point, the president of Ogilvy decided that and so, how do I say this in a nice way? The people who used to work at American Express were the guys who drank martinis and used to play golf. You know, so they take the client to lunch, they go play golf, and everything was good. And those guys didn't know marketing anyway, presumably. And but the world was changing, and so the CEO of Ogilvy decided that, in a incredible move that everyone was to pay attention to, they were going to move this experienced packaged goods person, me, onto American Express. And so the other thing was that it at the time was the largest account that Ogilvy had, and there was never a woman who had worked on it. And so here I was leading the biggest account that Ogilvy had, and God, it was great, because these guys were, you know, at a moment of great momentum for any brand, you almost can't do anything wrong. Everything you touch works, and they were so bold about the things they try. So, you know, I used to work on the packaged goods on Dove, where if you had an idea that you thought should run 3 years from now, you had to start talking about it now, because it would take 3 years for them to say yes. And then you went into American Express and you go, you know, I was thinking last night that if we could just figure out how to get college students to apply for American Express cards, and they go, okay, do it. And you'd go, I just had that idea for like 15 minutes. I wasn't fully formed or anything. And so so it was a really heady time where anything you could think of, they would do. They would try. And they were very experimental. So you could try anything. And as I said, you know, we launched corporate card, we had a business card, we brought women into the franchise, we did a card for students, we started to do all this co-op stuff with all the service establishments, the restaurants, and all that. And the American Express story actually leads to the IBM story, because there's what I call the American Express diaspora. All these people who worked at American Express and were wildly successful through this time went off to all these other companies and retained this relationship with Ogilvy in their hearts and minds, because we had this great run together. And it was so Lou Gerstner, who was the CEO of the card group at American Express, went to RJR, and then he became the CEO of IBM when they were really in trouble. And Lou is a really instinctive marketing brand person. And he brought over Abby Constam, who was at, I worked with at American Express as well. And together, they decided that the whole path to glory, to recovery for IBM was the brand. That if they didn't fix the brand, nothing else was going to happen, because at the time, IBM actually had negative brand value. On a list of 330 interbrand valuations, they were 327 with negative brand value, which if you think about it, says you would be better off shipping a product in a box that had no signage on it, said nothing, versus IBM, because it had negative brand value.
How much had they spent?
Oh yes, well they had spent, that was another thing. So they asked Ogilvy to come in and help them on this journey. And when we arrived, we went out and did focus groups, and we asked people about the brand and also about the advertising. Now, they had spent $500 million a year for the last 10 years, at least each year for 10 years, before we arrived on the scene. Not this group, but IBM had. And when you went to focus groups and asked people, well, what do you remember about from IBM advertising? Have you seen any IBM advertising? All they could remember was Charlie Chaplin, which hadn't run for 14 years. So 14 years times $500 million a year, and no one could remember anything. And it's a sobering moment, actually, if you're in the advertising business, as you're sitting on the other side of that mirror.
Who was that agency?
They had lots of that. Oh, so they had lots of that. I missed that part of the story. They had like 70 agencies that were working for them all over the place, all over the world. And what Gerstner did actually was that he said, the only way I'm going to get control of this is I'm going to pick one agency that I know, and I'm going to make everybody work through a single portal. And so I can get my arms around the IBM brand again, because otherwise, he said, I'm never going to get there. So that's what happened, and overnight we became the sole agency. There was a moment where I said to Abby, who I knew very well, I said, okay, well, you understand that as soon as you fire all these people, they're gone. They're going to go work on the next account. So if you could just give me the names of the people who you value, who are at all these other agencies, we'd be happy to hire them, and also it would really be a help to us if we could bring in these people who've had experience. And so I've never forgotten this. I went to see Abby one day. I said, okay, do you have the list? And she actually went into like a spiral-bound notebook, and she tore off a little piece of paper, and on it were 2 people's names. And she said, and this second guy, he's not that good. And it's like, so now all that money, all that time, all those people, all those agencies, and they had nothing at the end of the day. So, we just had to figure it out. But we had great clients. I mean, this is one of the things that any of you who work in marketing and advertising know, is nothing can be done without a great client. And it's not the agency. I mean, it's a partnership that happens, and there are when there's magic, it's because there's a client and an agency who have a relationship that lets you just do great things, and it's so important. And we had it then. We have it.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on getting assigned to those great clients, because women have made a lot of advancements in the business world, but talk about where the center of power lies in an organization.
Well, in any professional services organization, I don't care what it is. It's who is the lead on the major clients. It is, because that's who everybody sees. That's who everybody looks up to. I spent some time on a women's advisory group for Deloitte, and one of the and they used to parade all these women in front of us and say, they head up HR and all that, and I would always say, no, tell me where they are, tell me who your 20 largest clients are, and tell me where they are for your 20 largest clients, and they were nowhere. I mean, it's, you know, and until that happens, women are not powerful in an organization where all the revenues come from clients. I mean, you know, it's as easy as that. And I think, but I do think sometimes you have to ask for it. I mean, you have to raise your hand and say, I'd really like to work on that. And because sometimes it just doesn't occur to people that would be something that you want to do. And I raised my hand plenty. I mean, not in the instance of American Express or, you know, IBM came into me, and, you know, but that was at a point where I was much more senior. But when I was young, I used to ask to work on more things too, because I have a low boredom threshold. So I would always say, you know, whatever I was working on, I'd hear that something new would come into the agency, I'd raise my hand and say, I could handle that, I'd like to do that too. And it was always sort of, people seemed surprised, but you have to ask.
I have just two more questions, and then I think it would be a good time for the audience to chime in with your own. But I'd like to follow up on what you just said, because women are asking to get into the boardroom. And I'd like to hear what you think it's going to take in the United States for there to be some more headway there.
Okay. So here's one of my great frustrations about women on boards. There's not a company that on whose board I sit, or with whom I come into contact, or a CEO that I know, that is not saying that they want more women on their board. And I actually do believe it, because it would make their life much easier. You know, because they do. They feel pressure, and they feel people are looking at them. I was on a panel with a woman from Scandinavia. I think Norway is the place that first said 40%, right? So she was either from Sweden or Norway, but she was very familiar with what was happening. And she said women actually were outraged when this was first proposed, and said, you know, it's demeaning, it's disrespectful, people look at women on boards as just, you know, they're there because you have to, and everyone was against it. And she said now, years later, the truth is it's been brilliant for women. Because when you have a gun to your head, she said it is amazing the remarkable women you can find to put on boards. So I'd hate to think we're going to legislation, because I hate, you know, I'm a libertarian at heart. It's just, but I do think that companies are feeling pressure more and more, and part of the game is to figure out how we can expand the lists of interesting women who could sit on boards. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of the headhunting firms are taking on, because I mean, I play the game from both sides. I chair the nominating and corporate governance committee for GE, and when they give me the list of, you know, we're always trolling for new people, and and we sort of keep asking for interesting women, and there are a lot of categories that we ask for people in. But when the headhunter comes up with the list of the same 12 names that I could do myself, you know, you just have to push back and go, no, that's the list I could do. What I need you to do is find me the 12 women that I don't know who would be fantastic board members. And so I think there just has to be that push from the other side to just keep asking. You know, there've got to be more. There have to be some more interesting women. I'll tell you some really flat-footed ways that I've seen it done that are not working. There was an event at the New York Stock Exchange last summer. I don't know if anyone was there, but it was just horrific in my view. I mean, it was well-meaning. But they had people from nominating committees of boards and CEOs, presumably. I don't know who was actually in the room. And those people had a certain color badge. And then they had prospective women board members, and they had like a yellow badge, and it was like a mixer. It was just gross. I mean, it was just sort of, and that wasn't even as bad as the next day, which I did not attend, where it was like a speed dating thing where, no kidding, where people would, the nominating committee people would sit at a table, and then there, or maybe there was just one of them at each table, and then there would be 4 prospective board member women who'd have to answer questions like, you know, should you separate the chairman and the CEO roles? You know, these sort of more thoughtful questions. And they'd have like 5 minutes to answer, and then they go to the next table, and it's just, you're going, I kept saying, this is not the way we pick board members. It's not going to work like this. It's, there's got to be exposure, but it's got to be done in a different way. But we'll see, you know, so we have to keep at it. I mean, that's the thing, is to, and to keep growing the pool. I mean, right now, GE has, of 16 board members, 5 of them are women, which is not ideal, but it's not bad, given where they started. And so I just think you just have to keep the pressure on.
Thank you very much for that. And I'd just like to close by, first of all, saying thank you. This has been terrific from my perspective. We haven't talked a lot about the personal side of your life, but you did tell me a story that you learned that you were going to become CEO of Ogilvy while you were at a soccer game. Right. So I wonder...
Field day, not as good as a soccer game.
Field day, sorry.
Not as interesting as a soccer game.
So looking back, with everything that you've done, with the CEO, chairman, boards, what do you think of as your greatest accomplishment?
Well, my greatest accomplishment is that I've been married to the same man for 43 years. That we're happier now probably than when we first got married. That we have 3 sensational kids who were also very happy. You know, I always think when everyone's talking about balance, you know, we've been at this long enough. Someone ought to ask the kids of the working mothers and all that. How was it? And you know, how are you leading your lives now? So they're very well adjusted. They're very happy. They're, you know, they work, their spouses work, they're, and that, you know, is actually my greatest accomplishment. On the professional side, I do feel very strongly about the fact that I've been able to continue to run an agency where a company where I knew the founder, and 65 years later, we're still vibrant, and we're still successful, and we're still growing. You know, we're probably 10 times the size as when David left it. But the principles and the values that he set out at the start are still there, perhaps even more strongly than when he started the place. And that's something that I'm really very proud of, because you have to work at that. That doesn't happen by accident.
All right, so I'm going to hand the microphone back to Shelly, but let you all just put your hands up and start asking questions. And if a lot of you put your hands up at once, I'll start doing the you thing. So,
yeah.
Hi, my name's Beth Raisin, and this has been fabulous. You're a great storyteller. I have a philosophy that we learn the most from our mistakes, the things that don't go well. I wonder if you would share with us a challenge or a mistake you encountered that reinforced an important lesson for you that you can share with us.
Well, you know, I'm often asked that question, and I can never answer because I make so many mistakes. You know, it is the truth, but I agree with you that you learn from your mistakes, but I try to have them not be catastrophic. So you sort of don't have the major moment where you think, okay, I really blew that. It's but when I think about mistakes that I made, they all come back, most of them, to one thing, which is I knew I had to do something related to a person, and I never did it fast enough. You know, and it is so often that is, you know, something's not working. You want to believe that the person's going to figure it out, get better. He or she usually doesn't. You know, and you just ought to face it, do it, and get on with it, because it just gets worse. And the concentric circles of bad that start to happen around it, you know, just sometimes can become overwhelming. So, you know, that to me is over and over again. I have made that mistake, and I do try to get better each time. You know, I think, okay, I'm in one of those moments, just act. But it's all around that.
Yes. You, then you.
My name is Myron, and thank you so much for sharing with us such fascinating story about your career and your life. I want to ask about your leadership and management style. So how does your management and leadership style change over time during your career when you move up your corporate ladder? From when you was account senior until you was general manager, president, and CEO of a big organization.
Well, it actually hasn't changed very much. You know, there is an observation that people lead as they like to have been led, and I always felt, whenever, from the time I started early on, is just tell me what we're trying to accomplish. Tell me how we're going to measure ourselves. Tell me what needs to get done, and please get out of my way. And I will come back to you with the results. And if I fail, you know, I fail. And if I'm having trouble, I'll come back and see you. And so, you know, I've always, that's the way I lead, because I think that the stronger and more capable people are, the more they want to be left alone to lead. And so I think you have to be clear about setting the objectives. You certainly have to create an environment where people can be successful, but once you do that, you have to be good at delegating, but you have to delegate whole chunks. You know, you have to delegate assignments, you have to delegate goals, and then let people use all their skills and creativity to figure out how to get there. You know, I always like to say, give me 10 fabulous people, I could do anything. And I probably don't even need 10. I could get anything done. But you have to find your 10. You do. And you have to know who they are, and then you have to develop them and work with them and thank them and support them. And so, you know, it's, and be grateful every day that they're there, and make sure that they're happy and growing. It's because, you know, I always say people like to talk about CEOs all the time and the celebrity CEOs. You know, I don't forget for a day that I would be nothing without all the people who are around me, with me, and you have to treat them that way. You know, that they are essential to your success, and you know, do everything together. So it hasn't really changed. It's just, you know, I used to have supervised 2 people, and now there are 20,000 people at Ogilvy, but I still feel the same way about all of them.
Yes.
Thank you, Shelley. Nadine Chino. I just am humbled by hearing your words and what you've been able to accomplish with a sense of leadership and gratitude, because it's really about the team.
It is.
And every day that I go to work, I get that my team, without them, I am nothing. And until they're behind me, and until I can articulate what that vision is, they can't go anywhere. So you've really kind of created a summary of years of work that I've done on leadership personally for myself. And I just want to
so here's, you know, one of the great things about the job that I've had is I've gotten to observe across so many companies and so many leaders, and you know, you start to, I'm quite observant, and I'm curious and interested. So you start to watch, you know, for what makes people successful. And one of the things that I had no idea was true when I started out, but I now know is so true, is that great leaders are inherently generous. People don't talk about this. The great leaders are inherently generous. They share the problem, you know, they share the operation, they share the outcome, they share the glory. And it's just this inherent generosity, and no one talks about it. But it's true.
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm very curious about your experience joining the board of Blackstone. So can you share some of the stories?
Where do you work?
I don't work in private equities, but my boyfriend is in private equities. So I share a lot of stories from him, so I'm very curious about.
Well, today was my first board meeting, so I don't have a whole long history to share. I've known Steve and Schwarzman and Tony James for a long time, and here's what I would conclude after 2 days of orientation and 1 day of board meetings is what makes them exceptional is they have exceptional people. They are really they're smart, they're focused. And the commitment to Blackstone. There is a vision of what Blackstone's all about, and it's sort of like the anti-investment bank. It's a group of very capable men who years ago came together because they didn't like what they were experiencing at the investment banks that they were at. And they set out to found a firm that was different from Lehman Brothers or DLJ or all the other. So they started with a purpose. They started with a vision, they started with a point of view about how they were going to work with clients and what they were going to do. And it's still there, you can still feel it. And everybody who joins Blackstone joins because they go, yes, that's exactly how I feel, and I want to be part of this. And what they've been able to build in 25 years is really quite remarkable. They're the largest holders of real estate in the world. Everyone talks about them as private equity. It's real. I mean, real estate. And they're also, as someone who's in a creative business, they're extremely imaginative. I mean, just at the board meeting today, they talked about 3 new products that they've created in the last month, and all in response to client needs. So that's part of their sort of philosophy is they don't just manufacture stuff for the sake of selling stuff. They actually create products to meet the needs of their customers, and they're always doing it with this very sort of studied, responsible way of investing.
How did they reach you?
How
did they reach you?
Well, I know Steve Schwarzman. I know I know some of the guys who are there. But the truth is that I'm asked to join a lot of boards, and I usually just say no. But again, I have a very low boredom threshold. So Blackstone, I mean, I actually read the materials. I only understood half of it. And I thought, this will be fascinating. I mean, there were 2 charts today that I had no idea what they said. Absolutely not. And then so Steve's apologizing. I'm going, no, that's great. That's great, because now I can really learn stuff. Yeah, exactly. So, and the acronyms are impossible.
1, 2, 3, across the room.
Shirley Moulton, thanks for your lovely comments. They're amazing and very inspirational. I have a question, 2 actually. First is, are you an only child?
No, I have 2 younger brothers.
Boys. And the second one is, what's your take on lean in?
On what?
Lean in.
So I will share with you. So I was at the TED Talk for where Cheryl did the speech that became Lean In, and she was almost booed. So this is the thing that is amazing, because she was talking to a group of very successful women who tended to be older than she is. And it was a little patronizing, actually. You telling me to lean in. I've been leading my life quite nicely, thank you, up to this point. And so the thing that, even if you ask Pat Mitchell, who organized this TED conference, she was shocked when it went out on YouTube that this was the speech that everyone picked up and was talking about. And of course it was that speech that led Cheryl. So here's what I think about Lean In. Despite the fact that the words say, you don't have to be a certain way and behave a certain way and act a certain way, I actually think between the lines, all the way through, there is a suggestion of a way to be and a kind of behavior. There's an aggressiveness to it that I think, but I actually, my own view is it's all about authenticity. It is, you got to be who you are. And first of all, it works, but second of all, life is hard enough without trying to pretend to be some, you know, pounding the table, obnoxious, difficult person. So there's a suggestion of the way you have to be that I really hate. And I wish it would go away because I hate that.
Follow-up. Do you think that it gives companies a way to get off the hook?
It could. I think it's, you know, I think these CEOs are all calling me and going, they're calling me and asking if I should have a lean-in group. And I'm going, why would you? And they're going, I don't know, because I feel if I say no, they're going to say I don't get it or something, you know, so it's, these poor men, we've got to help them.
My name is Clara. I am just starting my career in advertising, so again, I think very inspirational. So I'm on my first year of account management on the agency side, so I was just wondering what advice you would have, other than raising your hand and speaking up, for someone just starting out.
Well, this is going to sound so ridiculous, but you do need to say it. You have to figure out whether you really like it or not. You know, I know people who go into advertising because they think they want to go into advertising, and then they come back and they go, this is a real career? I mean, this is so trivial and inconsequential and silly. And you go, you guys, you need to get out. Go do something else. But because I think you have to love what you do. I mean, the amount of resilience that you need in advertising, especially on the agency side, is remarkable. You know, for someone to say, I don't like that idea. You know, it's like there's no truth, there's no objective truth. So you got to be able to bounce back and go, okay, he doesn't like the idea, we'll bring him another idea. If you don't really love it, you're not going to last. And so you got to figure that out, is whether you like it or not. And then if you love it and like it, just go at it full blast. I mean, you know, that's what I think is just, don't be afraid. If there's an idea that you love, just speak up. And clients love it, actually, because they don't know what they're supposed to say when you show them work. And so if someone says, no, this is fantastic, they go, okay, yeah, it's great. I learned this. You know, it took me all these years to learn it, is they don't know. They don't know what to say. That's why they always start with the most junior person, by the way, is so that gives them time to figure out what they're going to say when they get to the, you know, to the top. I always used to think it was polite. No way. No way. It's a time buyer. So they, because you know, you've been thinking about this when you bring them an idea. You've been thinking about it for weeks, right? Days at least. And you present it to them, and 5 minutes later you want them to react and to applaud and to say, yeah, let's make it, and it'll be our new campaign. And so you gotta help them a little bit. But you gotta believe yourself.
Shelly, I'm going to switch gears for a second, and obviously being a lifelong New Yorker, and you must love our city.
I do.
Except for your stint in Ohio. Was it Shillito's or Lazarus or O'Neill's?
No, it was Reich's.
Reich's? Oh,
Reich's. Remember when they used to be Reich's?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I really wanted to get your opinion on the brand that New York City has developed under Mayor Bloomberg's tenure. I mean, we're now attracting 52 million
You're gonna make me weep.
visitors. 52 million visitors. So, what is your advice to the incoming, whoever it is, I'm not asking for your political views, but what would your advice be? And I hope you will be engaged in helping to create and further branding for the city, because I'm afraid.
I would just say the biggest fear that I have is that someone's going to stop doing what the Bloomberg administration has been doing, because they've been brilliant at it. I mean, you know, part of it is George Fertitta, who comes out of advertising. I mean, you know, who went and sort of sold tourism to Brazil and every other place, and you know, this is why you can't get to this building, right? Because it's so crowded. It's amazing, but it's when you think about what has happened in this city. and the fact that, you know, the kids are all moving to Brooklyn. They're not moving to the suburbs anymore. They don't want to leave. Nobody wants to leave. And so, you know, and it's imagination. I just love, you know, I'm not a big visitor to Staten Island, but the idea of putting up the London Eye in Staten Island with a mall, you know, with you know, all anybody from China ever wants to do when they come here is go to Woodbury Commons. So, no, that is the truth. So if you put Woodbury Commons in Staten Island, I mean, just think what could happen. No, exactly. No, but they're all thinking these things all the time. Is, you know, and they never stop. It's what can make it better? What more can we do? What more can we do that'll be interesting? And so I just...
so promise me you'll lend your expertise
oh, I will.
To the city when we move forward.
No. I will. But some of the candidates, I think, just they're trying to be different for the sake of being different, and that really worries me, actually.
I'm an old school marketer. Back in the 80s when you were on the American Express account, I worked for the market research company that did your market research.
Okay. Which what?
CLT
okay,
Research Associates,
yeah.
600 3rd Avenue. Anyway, I'm curious to know how you feel about social media and its role in marketing, because I'm a tough customer on it.
I know.
Do you have any insights?
I do. I get into trouble all the time.
Me
for
too.
this.
Me too.
So the thing about social media is, it is the way people communicate. I mean, these days. I mean, they communicate via Facebook and Twitter and all that. The problem that we face is we haven't figured out how to use them as advertising media.
Exactly.
And so everybody knows that those little ridiculous ads on Facebook and all that are just ridiculous. I mean, you know, they have no value. But you need to be where people are. So, I mean, I keep saying this to the people who own social media. You've got to lock in a room the 20 smartest people, creative people, about advertising that you know, and make them come up with 100 ideas for how one might use social media as an effective advertising medium. Well, look, so it's not that it's impossible. I mean, search is brilliant. There's one use that's brilliant. It's through my whole career before social media and the internet, everything we did would be to try to simulate a real conversation in real time with a customer or a prospect. That's what you were trying to do. Direct mail and, you know, commercials, and we even had print ads where you would fill in words, you know, it just, and now you can. So what do? We put small space print ads on the screen. You know, it's crazy. It's just, it's the interactivity of it that has the potential. So, I don't think we're there yet. We're in the very infancy. I keep thinking of a man who I saw in an interview on social media, and I wish I had captured it somewhere. It was like a 20-year-old guy, and they were asking him about Facebook. And at some point he said, I don't think these he didn't say manufacturers, but it was, you know, people who make things. I don't think you guys get it. He said, when we go to Facebook, it's not to have a meaningful relationship with wishbone salad dressing. and so here's the whole thing, is that's the way we're playing now, is to try to get likes, and it just doesn't mean anything. But it will. It has the potential to. And that's the frustration now, is you know you need to have it as part of the cocktail, but you also know it's not very effective as used right now. So that's the future.
We've got time for just one more. So if anyone's got one, raise your hand, and if not, yes, here we go.
What strikes me, we share Columbia Business School together. It's sort of what's fascinating is the way that you have always galvanized a group, and you find being able to tap into experiences that collectively make something better than what each of you has individually. How when you identify talent in somebody, what do you look for? Is it a way of approaching something, a methodology of thinking? What sort of aspects does that entail?
Well, you know, of course you look for a good brain, but even more than that, I look for people who are curious. because people who are curious tend to be willing to listen to other people. They're curious about people, they're curious about why things are the way they are. They tend to be open-minded because they're always thinking why and what's driving this thing happening, and they tend to be interesting people. So the people who don't do well in, I was going to say advertising or anything, or the people, the people that have to be the smartest person in the room, it's because they don't listen to anybody else. So you're not going to build an idea with someone else if you don't really respect their ideas at the start, even though you pretend you do. So a little bit of humility, a lot of curiosity, a good brain, a sense, in my business, a sense of humor, because if you lose that, you're just going to blow your brains out certain nights. And that's kind of, I look for passion. You have to be passionate about something. I don't actually even care what it is, but the ability to just kind of emote a little and care a lot about something. It is important when I'm interviewing people.
Shelly, thank you very much for your generosity and your humor, which I think Clara appreciated very much. And I would like to thank you all for your curiosity and your passion for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I hope you really appreciate this event this evening, because you've been in a room with an intimate conversation with one of the leading icons in the marketing and advertising industry, Shelly. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And Clara, thank you so much for joining us. Great interview. I know she enjoyed spending time with Shelly prior to this, and we thank you all for coming. We hope you had some tidbits of information that will help you build your business. Maybe we'll see you at some of our other events, and we want to thank you again, and have a good evening.
Thank you.